when I look at you, I don't see your mistakes.
Maybe that's the real punk rock.
You die, I die.
You got life! Cowhide. Synthetic cowhide.
He's flying.
Scooby-Doo.
Are you watching closely?
Yep, I'm
How are you
seeing it
doing,
on
Will?
YouTube.
Perfect. I've not seen that mine yet.
I'm doing all right. Finishing up some homework and stuff. Had an interview for an internship 2 weeks ago, so we'll see how that goes. Otherwise,
Nice.
it's calving season starting, so it's going to be a lot of waking up at 1 or 3.
Explain that.
Trying to
I'm
clean
not
up all the
familiar.
slopping. So the way that it works is that there's different seasons on a farm, which is for a lot of things.
Yeah.
But calving
Yeah.
season in particular, our family particularly usually has it designed so that most of them are going to start calving in like the middle of March.
Oh,
throughout April.
calving season. I don't know why I thought you said cabin season. I'm like, you don't have a cabin.
Well, we do. I grew up in a log cabin,
Calving.
technically, but yeah, calving season.
Sure. I just
Yeah.
misheard.
So
you.
so someone has to like check every 2 hours or so like that whenever we lock up the heifers. So it's like
Sure.
1 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
then most of the time it's fine. Sometimes you gotta pull them out, but
Fun. Fantastic.
yeah.
I love that for you. Anyways. Cool. Well, I would like to draw attention to my shirt, which I found very hilarious. I don't know if it's backwards for Will, but
I can see it. I can read it. Yeah, things
It's-
Canada does better
does-
than America.
okay, yeah.
Everything. Sorry, no.
No. We just won our 3rd gold medal against Canada today in the Paralympics hockey. Sorry, hockey specifically. And for being the national sport, Canada kind of sucks at their own game. I just gotta throw shade where I can. I actually don't know if the women's Paralympians even have hockey and if they have even played them yet, but maybe we'd go 4 for 4. That'd be really fun. All right. Making sure everything's all right. You wanted to talk to everyone and me about Les Mis again. And so this is our first revisited episode, which is great because I wanted to do revisited episodes moving forward because there are some guests that didn't get to talk about them. And like Zach never got to talk about The Prestige because that was the first episode ever. So last time we talked about it was 2 years ago, February 2nd, 2024. And I didn't even have notes for that. I was kind of banking on the notes that I wrote then, but oh well. Annika and Josh and I talked a lot about the music and the versions between like the Broadway version and various anniversaries. So go listen to that for more ground level one. But obviously Will was not on that episode. So
Really, it wasn't? Oh
We
yeah,
were
that's
not.
right. I wasn't. Oh man, I kind of just thought I thought I was.
It was Annika.
I
and
think it's probably
Josh.
because I've talked to Annika and you about Les Mis. We've talked about it before in the past.
Sure, because we
It's kinda just-
talked a lot about that stuff in high school and such.
So maybe I just kind of jumbled it all together.
Yeah. Anyways, it's called Les Good, Les Bad, and Les Miserables. I believe actually you came up with that title.
Yeah, I think I did. I did.
and
come
I
up
was
with that.
very proud of you for that one.
Yeah.
But we listened to a bunch of the music, talked about some things that the fans don't really like about Les Mis, like basically the entire movie with Hugh Jackman and Russell Crowe. But it's a great story. And I think you really wanted to talk about the meaning behind it a lot more. And I love that because I think it's one of those stories that really turns into a Christian analogy story the more you look into it very easily. And it's also one that doesn't shove the gospel in your face, but it's very obviously there. So that's why a lot of Christian literary people like it, I would say. And with that, give me kind of your premise, why you said, hey, let's talk about this instead of anything else.
Yeah, so I'll give you some background. And if any people are active on Discord, which you should totally join,
I should.
Links in the description, or they should be, or something.
Sorry, I couldn't give you guys an earphone warning before that.
But yeah, on Discord, I had posted a while ago, or whatever, that I was starting my reading journey on Les Mis, because I've been going through this classics reading list, and I'm almost finished. The last few ones are just a couple of heavy hitters, but I'm almost finished with that. And Les Mis was one of the ones that I've been dreading for a while, because I like to listen to things on audiobook. For me, I spend a lot of hours on our farm working on like fences or just doing outdoor activities and stuff like that for long periods of time, which aren't too complicated. And so I like to listen to audiobooks because I can download them and listen to them while I'm working, and they're really good. So I did Les Mis. I started that and talked about that a little bit on the Discord. And it was interesting listening through all 60 hours, because it's like 2,300 pages, I believe. In its original print. It's a very long book that's unabridged, and so I finally got through all of it, which was a bit of a task. But I really enjoyed listening to it and actually going through it slowly. And I'm not like the most musical person in the group, between like Seth and Annika and all of and others like that. I enjoy some musicals, but I'm not like, and I've been in some musicals, but I'm like super into it. So I found it interesting, like listening, like comparing some of the things about like the movie, the 2012 movie and the musical versus the book, and how, and more importantly, what I was struck by is how they impacted me personally, as in like how I was drawn to the ideas of the stories, and how, and more the emotional and kind of spiritual impact in particular. And so that's kind of why I want to talk about like Les Mis, is like how the medium is of adaptation is used differently. So, there's a difference between like the book original versus the movie adaptation, and that's for a lot of things. And that's kind of what I want to use, is I want to explore Les Mis as like kind of an original book, kind of compare it and contrast it to how it's been adapted more widely and popularly, and how that popular understanding is a bit different than how the original book, and how they're not necessarily wrong, but like they're different visions and ways of portraying that same story, and where some of the strengths and differences lie, and then kind of to extrapolate onto other media adaptations of other books as well.
Yeah. Cool.
So yeah, that's kind of like the background. That's kind of what I was interested in, and I've got like a lot of notes and stuff like that we can go into it.
Go for it. You're the driving force here.
Sweet. Okay. So first off, just a little bit of background for Les Mis, if people don't know the history of the book, because I'm a history nerd. I have to let this out. But it's from 1860. It's originally from that. And the first thing that you're going to notice if you read the book is, one, it's very long, like I've already said. And two, it's also, one person describes it as literally gassy, because to quote here, more than a quarter of the novel, by one count 955 of 2,783 pages, is devoted to essays that argue a moral point or display Hugo's encyclopedic knowledge, but do not advance the plot nor even a subplot. So, for example, he literally has 19 chapters on just the Battle of Waterloo, like just Waterloo, like just like
That's
19 chapters of that. And the first 5 minutes of the film, in the 2012 film, focus on, for example, on Jean Valjean, versus the first hour of the audiobook focuses entirely on Bishop Marial. So that should give you an idea that this is a very, like, it's and granted, there's abridged versions, which I think could be useful, but there's a certain charm to reading through all of it, if it is a bit of a slog. So that's the first thing that that's a big difference, I think. And I think that is a sort of strength that the book has. And this is kind of maybe not my main thesis, but something I think that I kind of want to focus on for overall that I noticed is that the difference between book adaptations and the original book material is that by their nature, all media adaptations are going to have to conflate things. They have to constrain them in some way, because most movies are going to be like 3 hours at most. A couple are going to be fewer, a little longer, but most are going to be like 3 hours at most. Usually they're shorter than that. So a good example is Lord of the Rings. A lot of stuff had to be cut because you can only have so much space. And I think that it is important that movies have a certain power in that they're able to provide a visual symbol of what it is, and they can impact you differently. Same thing for like how music and video games and different mediums can have different impacts, because a movie has the benefit of a picture, and a picture is a one picture is worth 1,000 words, and a movie has like a million pictures that are constantly moving in rapid. So you can say a lot with just very little. But the difference, I think, and this is kind of why I think, maybe I'm just saying like books are better in general, but kind of going through all of Les Mis slowly is very different, because you actually, I think you are better able to understand the actual themes, underlying point of it all, in a way that it's not quite as articulate. It's not able to quite as hit you as well when you're actually listening through it carefully. And an analogy I kind of was thinking of is like, difference between like eating food. Like sometimes, and this isn't the perfect analogy, but sometimes you have like a very simple homemade meal that you enjoy. Sometimes you have like a fast food meal that's just quickly made. It's tasty, it's nice, but it doesn't last long. And then sometimes you have the process of actually, you're the one who's hunted the animal, you gut the animal, you clean it all up, you go through this entire process of making the food all yourself, and then you have it yourself. You've gone through an entire process of making this food, and that is going to, how you enjoy that food is going to be different than if you just have somebody else quickly make it in a fast food restaurant. That's a bit of a weird analogy, and I'm trying from my own experience to make that case. But that's kind of what I mean by here, is that most movies are like an afternoon sitting, and most books, even if you are a fast reader, like I read a lot of books and I enjoy reading a lot of books, they are just not going to. Most of the time, you don't have enough time to simply sit through and finish all of them in 1 hour, or in 3 hours, or in an afternoon. It's a journey, and that journey, I think, the journey in and of itself of going through reading and listening, or listening to an audiobook, or just reading the original book, is going to have an impact that actually makes it more, it hits you differently. And I think it hits you deeper than a regular type of film normally does. Film does have a lot of strengths, but the original medium of actually listening to all of the, like, you're able to actually explain so much more, and you are kind of able to rely on your own imagination and understanding of that. And I think it hits you differently. So that's kind of a bit of a long-winded summation of what I'm trying to say here, but read more books. But
it's true.
Yeah. And I'll point to some specific quotations going on, but what are your thoughts about that?
I think we've always praised the writers who will take the time to write deep parts of their book, and I feel like some do that better than others. Some do it like extremely well, to the point that it's a fault. Like you said, Hugo can just write and write and write, and sometimes that doesn't help. But I mean, I think that when you want a deep story and your heart is in it, like, you can just write and write and write. And if that's where it is, if it's coming from a place of inspiration and creativity, that's fine. That's great. And I think you can't knock it completely, because it's better to write more than to write less. Now, you just need to probably have an editor, like you would these days, to be like, hey, maybe cut that whole chapter because it has nothing to do with the story or whatever. But I don't think he had an editor back then. It's also important to remember that for a lot of the old timey, like whenever anyone lists like classic novels, a lot of times those ones are produced in the format of like, it's a one chapter. They're produced for like 3 or 4 years, because they're produced serially, which is they're not produced like it's a book. It's more of, I'm writing a chapter and it's posted this week in like this newspaper, and then I'll write another chapter next week or something. It's often in that case, which is why like what's Tolstoy's work that's really, really long? War and Peace is like freaking long, or all the Russian hint. Russian reading for Russian classics is it's something. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily wish it on anyone, but it can be good. But it can also be, oh my gosh. Well, and I think that with Les Mis being one of the staples of literary history or literature history, it's a very interesting study case to find out all these things that you've just shared. To just be like, this guy believed in making a good story. And I don't know what other, if we know any of his other works.
Hunchback of Notre Dame is going to be the other one that you're. Yeah, Victor Hugo wrote that one. That's the other. That's probably his only other really, really well-known work, I think. There's a couple other ones but those ones are a bit more like literary. People are going to know that, probably not average people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing I'm trying to say here is that like I think a lot of books are so difficult to get into. A lot of like really good ones and deep ones that are so difficult to get into that you kind of need a more palatable adaptation. Like I'm thinking of War and Peace, for example, like that, because it just gets so convoluted that sometimes you need something simpler. But I think what I'm saying is that those ones are by their nature kind of limited, and that's what I mean by this is like Les Mis, the adaptations of that are good, but they're limited. And I would encourage people to actually, if you want to really understand more what it's saying, and for a lot of what these ones are actually, how powerful they actually can be, I'm basically encouraging people to actually pursue the original source, to kind of go out a bit out of your comfort zone and try and investigate what the original classics are trying to say and what these original authors are trying to say in their works, because you're going to get a lot deeper meaning than kind of the like what that's the I've heard this term float around, like normie slop, quote unquote, which is not quite applicable, but the idea of like something that's just like it's for a broad audience, but it's not quite as it's a good overview, but I think there's more. I think I'm trying to encourage people to actually look into going deeper than what often is presented and what we're given in like Hollywood and things like that.
Yeah. I'm reading the religious views of Victor Hugo on Wikipedia, which again, Wikipedia, place for all truth and factual info. He became very frustrated with the Catholic Church, it looks like, even though he was raised Catholic. But he was actually, I guess it doesn't say Les Mis, but it says that he was also upset by the frequency with which his work appeared on the church's list of banned books. He counted 740 attacks on Les Mis in the Catholic press. So people didn't like his work back then, in the sense of he was very he stirred the waters, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and that's the interesting thing about Les Mis is that when you're reading it, like, again, I think you kind of described it pretty well. It's not like it's coming like, and here's the gospel and here's what you need to believe in, but it's so clearly religious. And that is an aspect that I don't think that's captured really in any other adaptation. Just like the how like spiritual it actually is, particularly with the focus on Jean Valjean and his character. Like there's so much that just is that often like sometimes I'm listening to him like, wow, that dang, I need to pause and like think about that for a second, because there's just so much religious symbolism, religious ideas, and just like a much more just like an overall foundation that you can tell this guy is clearly like religious and a Christian of some degree. And that's the thing that I've also noticed with a lot of books is that even like modern ones, like I can often tell what the religious leanings of this person is based on just how they're writing and what they're writing about and the characters that they're writing about and things like that. And you can often very much tell like, oh, this is, even if this is like nothing to do with Christianity or religion at all, you can tell you can often tell who the person is based off their works. And that's, that's from the Bible as well, where it talks about the fruits that you produce. And you can often tell, where the fruit is coming from based on their works.
Yeah. Cool. Is that all the history behind the story that you had, or was there?
That's kind of like the overall history thing. The other thing that I kind of had was one, for example, some differences that are interesting, and then there's a couple of quotations that I kind of wanted to point out just to kind of show the difference between what is portrayed and how it's portrayed, and the power of that, but also like the sort of depth, I think, to a lot of these original classics, in particular focusing on Les Mis in this case. So I had a couple of quotations about that.
Okay. You can do that.
Yeah,
I don't have anything, dude. I'm telling you, you are the horse pulling this buggy.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so just some differences that I just think are interesting in general. One, and this isn't quite a difference, but like in the novel especially, like Cosette is just like the sweetest, most innocent, like it's a lot of like archetypal stuff. Like you have the Tienders. I don't know. That's one thing I don't like about this. It's French. Freaking hate the French language. I'm sorry. I'm not racist, but if I was, it's the French for a lot of reasons. But that, and they have terrible philosophies. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, I listened to the Focus on the Family Radio Theater.
Don't know if who's paused or if it's me.
Thénardier. Oh, he's back. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't
there we
know
go.
how much.
Yeah, I just heard the last part, 290 or whatever.
Yep.
Okay. Anyways, there's those people are like the evil ones, and like they're just so overwhelmingly evil. And then you have like Bishop Muriel, who's like so overwhelmingly good. Like, and again, it's bit. I think for coming from like a 21st century postmodernist, like everything is shades of gray. It's interesting. Kind of how not refreshing, but just like how like just like these characters are like so archetypally one thing in some sense, but also they have so much complexity as well, which is interesting. The other thing is that, and this is interesting, that you could actually do a whole rabbit hole with how Hollywood portrays ugliness and beauty and things like that. But in the novel, like they really do focus on like the griminess that I don't think is like there is that in the movies and the adaptations. But like for example, like Eponine is like she's described as just like very like ugly, like her voice is just hoarse and all this sort of thing. And then like Fontaine, here's one thing that really struck out to me is that in the novel, like I mean, she's almost unrecognizable. Like her hair is gone and her front teeth are literally pulled out. She has them surgically like pulled out and like sold, and she becomes and like they like when you're looking at the 2012 film, like I mean, it's Emma, not Emma, Anna Hathaway. Anne Hathaway.
Anne Hathaway.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. That's right. Anne Hathaway, and like you know, like she's. I mean, like obviously it's not. It'd be a little hard if you just pull out the teeth and stuff like that. You could green screen it, but it's just interesting that, and this is something I found throughout other Hollywood films, is that they're willing to portray ugly stuff, but Hollywood ugly is very often not like actually ugly in my experience. Like with the new Frankenstein movie, I think that came out, and I haven't focused on too much, but I know a little bit about like the portrayal of the monster in that, who is like sort of handsome in a weird way or something like that. And so it's just this weird, well, I mean, not a weird thing, but it's just an interesting thing that like Hollywood will be brave in like showing depictions of violence and all this sort of stuff. And there's a lot of weird things like they will show, like nudity. Oh yeah, sure, whatever. But we can't make our actors look ugly. Oh, so it's just, I mean, it's just interesting about that. How, you know, like that was one thing that I was really struck by, just how like Les Mis is not afraid, like the original book, it's not afraid to like get kind of down and dirty and like depicting like moral sin and how that often is shown physically. Because that's you know that's often like that's a very common literary trope. Like you identify how somebody physically appears, and that is tied to like their moral character as well.
Yeah,
some other things.
I remember the movie. You know. I remember the movie being pretty gruesome as well. It's still PG-13, but it's a hard concept regardless, especially just Cosette's mother being in the situation she's in, and it's not easy to watch, and that's fine. But I'm just saying, I don't think the book was the only thing that was not holding back. Obviously, you had to hold back for the movie because it was PG-13, and you still got to not make it that gruesome, but you can still show or you can express the gruesome things, the difficult parts of the life of these individuals in a story that is meant to make you sympathize for them. So
yeah, and that's, again, I think that's a good point about like the constraints, because again, different movies, different times, different constraints. But even still, I just find it interesting overall that, and there's like a lot of people who have noticed this as well, but just like, for example, how average actors just seem to be, no matter what film they are, they just look prettier than like maybe like 20, 30 years ago. Average actors just kind of look average, normal.
Yeah.
Like you can like almost tell if everyone has like Botox or something like that. And that is almost in one way an immersion out of the story. And this is like a bit of a broader thing that goes more beyond just like this particular topic. But that's just one thing I did notice as well. It's just like, oh, you know, and that's one thing too. When I'm talking about like what you're able to do in a book versus like a film, is like a film, like you see it, and so that is what it is. Whereas in any textual document, you you are the one who's creating the film in your own head. You are given all the power to imagine what this looks like based on the description, and that is so much more powerful. Oftentimes, because whatever it is whatever you create is going to be like infinitely better than whatever you actually see, because once it's seen, that's what it is. It is solid. It is set in stone, whatever that depiction is.
Yeah, I think we might have done a whole episode. It gets a little blurry when you get 160 episodes in. I think talked about how movie adaptation or book adaptations can have that problem. Obviously, you just said it, so it's not something we haven't already talked about, but it's somebody's interpretation of a visual thing that's being described in the book and might not be the way somebody else interprets it or whatever. And so you're taking away that imagination from the reader instead of just letting it be a book. Now it can help sometimes, and sometimes it's inspiring to see a movie in that way. Like I would say, well, that's a little different, but The Passion of the Christ is probably super influential for most Christians who see it, to see the actual things that happened in a visual format rather than just reading it. But maybe for Les Mis, it might have, like you said, it hits harder when it's just a book or an audiobook instead of somebody's interpretation, which I don't even know who wrote the movie or who, like I know the actors in it. Directed by Tom Hooper, no one I recognize. Produced by people I don't know. So it's just the actors that I recognize.
Yeah, that's
Andy
often the case for a lot of films.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and the other thing, just a couple of the things I noticed. For example, they skipped out, unless I'm misremembering it. But there's like this whole instance where the tiendas, I again hate French names. I'm sorry. Is they're trying to like, there's like this whole like, there's a like, I think like there's a lot more focus on them than I feel like in the film and the musical. Like there is, but in the book, like there's a lot more of like, they're pretty much like the omnipresent evil like shadow of like Cosette throughout her entire life. Like they're the ones who have her when she's a youth, and then they tried to like basically capture and blackmail Jean Valjean while they're hiding in Paris, and then like they're near at the end. And that's one thing like that. The other thing that is interesting about the film, I don't know if it's touched on the musical as much, but Javert is the one who's kind of basically who quote unquote kills Fantine, because in like the original book, Fantine is like on her deathbed, and then she actually doesn't die like as peacefully in the film, and which is like she's like, oh, I'm so sad, and then Javert's like, hey, I'm here. Like in like the original book, it's more like he like shows up there and like she's basically like shocked to death, and that's the other thing, interesting thing about I think for casting Hugh Jackman is that Jean Valjean in like the book is like he's like terrifyingly strong, and I don't think they ever quite captured that. Like he literally is captured by Javert, and he escapes by like hiding underwater on a boat, and then like he like the whole instance of like him lifting off the cart is pretty well known, and like just he's like obsessively strong, but like you always know that he never actually uses it, and like so whenever he gets angry, you really get terrified. This is something else interesting for casting wise, that just like you don't quite feel that like raw, like holy smokes, this guy is dangerous. But also that's part of his moral character, is like how to overcome that and become a better man and things like that. And the final thing that I think was interesting is how they end. So if you look at the 2012 film, you know, we have like the rendition of Do You Hear the People Sing, and it's all like, yeah, we're in this barricade, and it's all like to love another person is to see the face of God, and like there's the big banner waving, all that sort of stuff. And that's very interesting to how the book ends, which I might just read a quote from it, but it ends not in jubilation, but in a somber piece, because it ends with his death. Like, you know, he's finally reconciled with Marius, he's got Cosette, and he's like just like he's on his death throes, and he's basically just content. And like he specifically in this last passage of like the novel itself, Leary is just telling about how there's a simple cemetery with an unmarked stone, and it only has one thing on it. And I think I'll just read like that. So let me find that quote right here. Yeah. So yeah, it just says like, you know, there's a simple cemetery. No name is to be read there. One only many years ago, a hand wrote upon it in these pencil these 4 lines, which have become gradually illegible beneath the rain and the dust, and which are today probably effaced. He sleeps, although his fate was very strange. He lived. He died when he had no longer his angel. The thing came to pass simply of itself, as the night comes when day is gone. And that's the ending to the novel of like 60 hours of like listening to this, or 2,732 pages of reading this if you're reading it. And I find that it's an interesting contrast again between like the Hollywoodification of things is that you have to be like more dramatic, more emphasis on emotions and drama and like boom and wow. And I don't know, it's this is what I'm talking to about the meaning of like a journey versus like an afternoon, where movies are very impactful. I'm never going to deny that. Like, and like, there's been some that I've like, wow, that you just got to say afterwards and think about them. But I think there's a certain power, and there's a certain difference when you read a book and you're kind of investing yourself a bit into it, and you go along in this period of becoming involved with these characters, walking alongside them. And I think this is where TV shows have some more power and strength in that regard because of their long form format, long content format, whatever. Like when I finish this, and for me, oftentimes I'm listening to these outside and I'm in nature, I'm by myself, and sometimes you'll just finish. Like there's such a strange feeling when you finish a really long book and you just sit there and you just like think like, "Wait, I'm done. What I do now?" Like and it's hard. And I'm this is my bibliophilia really coming out here for this entire episode. But I think that we're so used to short form, instant gratification that there's a certain sadness I see for myself when I'm just like, there's so much more depth to the world that we're all unable to either choose to participate in or to witness. Like just going for a long walk in nature and just like actually fully understanding the complexity and the interesting reality that we live in. Contemplating history or philosophy or just like reading really like good books or just like there's so much depth in that I feel is very lacking in our popular culture that kind of makes me sad. And this is maybe like old man grumbles about modern technology almost coming out a bit from me, but that's kind of where my heart is coming from. Is this kind of the same thing with the Bible, that there's so much depth to it that oftentimes when people just say it's all about love, or it's all just this simple pithy, I'm going to post it on Instagram and it's a nice colorful cursive quote. Like, yes, there's certain things about that we want to spread, but there's so much that I feel in our popular culture, in particular, I'm using that term for like the broad interaction that everyone has, that is just shallow, I think is kind of the best term. That I feel like there's so much more that we could be devoting our time and interest in that would be so much better to like the individual soul and to the soul of the entire nation, I guess, civilization, that is just kind of lacking, I feel like. And this is getting a little deep, I guess, but that's kind of the point. Is I feel like I think that we need and should be encouraging people to go into deeper things, into deeper conversations, and some of the depth of the history that we have and the literary history that we have, and not just be accepting of the simple, here's your daily slop and have it and enjoy it.
Yeah. Hunter's in the chat. Hey. Says the movie kind of made Jean Valjean kind of wimpy, other than the beginning scene of him pulling the anchor or something, the anchor to pull the rope in. I didn't get much of a feeling he was monstrously strong. I definitely think that the way the book described it, or at least how I listened to it in the audio drama, which I believe is pretty faithful, it sounds like he's more superhuman, or like at the very least the standard for strong men was much lower back in the day, and maybe he was just a bodybuilder.
Well, it's mostly because like he throughout the novel they're constantly talking about how this is a guy who's like, you just look at his hands, like he's clearly like he's worked 20 years as like essentially a slave basically, which is, and that's actually interesting because the character of Jean Valjean is in part based off a real guy, Eugène Francois Vitico, who I'll just read off his brief bio. He's a French criminal turned criminologist whose life story inspired several writers, including Victor Hugo. He was the founder and first director of France's first criminal investigative agency, as well as the head of the first known private detective agency. And he's got a lot of accreditations. And he's like, there's like an instance where he basically did what Jean Valjean did, which is go underneath the cart and like lift it up, and that's what inspired that actual incident. So, which is cool because there's an actual history towards it. But that's like the whole point, is that Jean Valjean is a criminal who has been mistreated, misaligned, and he almost has every right to lash out, but he doesn't. And that's like, there's two different turning points in the novel. There's first the instance with Bishop Mario, who was like, you should pursue being a good man, a Christian man, and things like that. And then there's the instance with Fantine, which actually, if you don't mind me being a little pithy, I'm going to see if I can find another quotation, because this is again what I mean when I think like the book has a lot of power that some of the novels don't. So let me see if I can find it.
Mhm. Oh, Zach's here. He said he couldn't make it today, so he scheduled Will.
Wow. Well, I hope I'm not disappointing, Zach. Let me see if I can find it.
Such a disappointment.
And that's what my mother says every day. I'm kidding. I am not abused. I'm sorry. I'm joking. That is a joke.
While you're looking that up, I was thinking about just a strong man in general, and my grandpa was one of those people who he just had massive hands from being a farmer, and he was short and stocky, kind of that build where I don't know, maybe he was 5'8" or 5'10". We don't get height from him.
Sounds very Norwegian.
Swedish. But
well, I think the the Norwegians are, I think,
Swedes.
Well, if I remember correctly, because I we're probably of both ends of the street, but it's like the stereotype is that Swedes are more like stocky, and the Swedes are more beautiful, and well, essentially, and fair. Generally speaking, that's kind of like the stereotype.
My grandpa was not fair. He was rough and tumble. He was a hardworking farmer, and he was just strong as could be. I don't know if the book describes Valjean's height at all. Oh, Zach's gone. But my grandpa was definitely just a strong farmer, and if that's kind of the picture that I have of Valjean, I think that's close enough. At least he's not a bodybuilder. He's not Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he could be just strong functionally, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
You got it.
I think. Yep. This is the one. So, for context, he's got Cosette there. This is when she's still a child. He's just brought her to Paris. They're in a hotel and stuff like that. And this is the first time that she has actually seen actual people loving her. And this is like Jean Valjean has made this vow to Fantine. I'm going to find your daughter and keep her safe and things like that. And I find this is really interesting. And this is what I mean by one of the strengths of the book is that you can actually get into the heads of characters and you can kind of investigate these ideas, I think, better than often media is able to. So, and this is right now their hotel. Jean Valjean had never loved anything. For 25 years, he'd been alone in the world. He had neither been father, lover, husband, friend. In the prison, he had been vicious, gloomy, chaste, ignorant, and shy. The heart of that ex-convict was full of virginity. He had, let me just ignore that. When he saw Cosette, when he had taken possession of her, carried her off and delivered her, he felt his heart move within him. All the passion and affection within him awoke and rushed towards that child. He approached the bed where she lay, sleeping and trembled with joy. He suffered all the pangs of the mother, and he knew not what it meant. For that great and singular movement of a heart, which begins to love, is a very obscure and a very sweet thing. So that's just a very brief quote, and like there's a lot of these longer ones. But that's what I mean. Like there's just a certain beauty to writing that I find that good writing can really impact you in such a way that is so hard, I think, for a lot of films too, because films can they can hit you with the emotional stuff, but I don't think they can quite hit you in the same sense that like just makes you like, wow, type of thing. And again, that's not all things, but
some can.
Some can.
Some movies can, but I definitely think the idea of heartfelt writing is definitely shown better in books.
Yeah, and it's just, again, it's the depth of it that is often so able to be articulated that I feel that people would benefit a lot of if they chose to try and investigate those type of things. And it's not, and again, I'm not like saying like I'm like this well-known literary person who knows all these things. I'm so much better. Like, no, I'm quite flawed in many ways and have a lot of issues. Sorry. But what I'm kind of trying to say throughout this episode, and I'm not like I don't want to sound like I'm preaching now, but I'm trying to say is that I think that our culture is we have been so lacking in such authenticity and depth in the things in the stories that we tell, because what a culture tells is important to what its future is going to look like, and also shows you something about what that culture believes. And so you can investigate what is this culture, what are the stories that they're telling, what are the poets that they have, what are the authors and the literary people that they lift up at that time, and that tells you a lot about the society and what they believe. And looking at what our society and what we believe and what we lift up as great stories and storytellers and things like that, I feel and I believe that we're quite lacking in a lot of ways, and that it's become shallow. I think is kind of like the best term, is that there's just so much appealing to mass. There's so much mass appeal appealing to like the broadest denomination. You know, we just want things to be cookie cutter and nice and simple and happy and whatever. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing per se, but I think that I think that it would be better. And I think that part of the reason that we have some of the issues we do is that we don't have people who are able to fully articulate some of the great difficulties and interests and the drama and the complexities of life and civilization and society and all the issues that we deal with. And we haven't like raised up people in investigating these type of like ancient classics and literally literary novels and things like that people investigate so that they can learn, because that's one of the best things about reading novels and books and stuff like that, is that it lets you understand something without having actually like witnessed it or been there. Like I was reading The Grapes of Wrath a couple of months ago, and that really gets you into the mindset of how of like just like following this family on this journey, moving from like during the Great Depression to California and the discrimination that they face and things like that. That's going to impact you and actually hit you in such a way that like just like hearing a statistic isn't going to. And that's what I mean, that like stories have such a great power, and all like this is all medium, but in particular really good literary classics I think have such a power that is often missed. I think that people are it would be of benefit if more people focused on and learned and listened from them as well.
Houndor says, I also believe most of the older theater and musicals were made to make and emphasize a political point in some sort of place of old gestures. But that's just a theory. That's kind of what you're saying. It at the very least shows the important thing that somebody wants to describe in their writing. You know, they're like, hey, I feel this is important. And maybe it's not. I've always been frustrated. Okay. Things like, I think, what was it? I think it was the Darth Maul show that's coming out that people were talking online about. I really hope that it was the Lantern show. They were talking about, I really hope they talked more about the racism in America and how, because it's all about colors in the Lantern Corps. It's like the yellow, the green, and some people, and these guys were like, they were saying that Lanterns needs to talk about that. And I disagree, because I think escapism is stronger than a message. We should always find a message in our movies, and so that we're not watching mindlessly. But we still need to escape sometimes, and it can just be a fun story. There's a balance, I think, and maybe.
Yeah, well, you go. Sorry.
No, you go.
Well, I was just gonna say. Sorry, I keep interrupting. Do you have something to say?
No, just go ahead. Whatever you're thinking.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna say that. Yeah, you're right. Like, there's like not every story has to be the same. But I think I believe that every story has a point. Now, that doesn't mean it necessarily has a message, like in a sense of like, here's the problem and here's how we need to fix it. But every story should have a point, but not every story has a good point. And like sometimes the point is, you know, like here's just something to kind of take your mind off of things, and here's just like this fantastical reality we can look about. But every story has a point, and every story should have a good point that it's trying to make, or that it's saying, or something about it that actually makes it worthwhile. And that's like the thing is that a lot of the media that we have, like, you know, especially with AI, there's just like the term AI slop. Like that's often accurate. There's just so much stuff pumped out by the internet that's just, again, the word I think best describes it as like shallow or unworthwhile. That I feel like there's a lot of, you know, missing depth that we don't have, that is kind of sad that we don't like aren't able to like think about those type of things or focus on those type of things or even understand and articulate those type of things.
Yeah.
And we're just kind of like, you know, instead of we're just all about whatever petty thing we want to focus on.
Houndor, I don't think I'm gonna get into that. I don't know if Will can see it.
I can't. I'm just on Riverside, so I'm not on YouTube, so I don't.
I agree, but we're not talking about that today. We're talking about how people, you know, write it into stories. And when it comes to Les Mis, there were, especially with the whole French Revolution setting, I think there was, and being written from the point of view, at least from the college student, or okay, maybe I'm getting my history wrong. You would know. Is this the French Revolution or is this some
No,
offshoot?
it's tied to it. So the French, as is their wont, have many histories of, or have a long history of issues with their government, and so there have been many. There's been the French Revolution, and there have been many French revolutions in the sense of so this one takes place in 1934 or not 1834. So this is after Napoleon.
I was going to say this was written in mid 1800s. So
so it's 1834 if I remember correctly. Basically, there's just like the French every now and then in Paris decided, screw the government, we're going to build a barricade, and so this is one of those instances. That's what he's focusing on, a particular historical period and a historical event where this group of protesters and students, I don't remember all the details, but basically, it's as kind of described in the novel. People are upset with the current regime, and they erected some barricades, and it's just thrown down. So that's pretty much what it is. That's kind of more or less the backdrop of sorts, but it's also somewhat of a focus as well. So it's not the 1793 or 94 French Revolution, but it is in a similar idea where it is during the Revolutionary era.
Yeah, but he wrote it from the perspective of the college students who were trying to uprise against the government. And if that were to be done today, it would be a very different story. But usually people will see a story like Les Mis and figure out that the government are the bad guys in the sense, and that the small man just wants some freedom. And I think setting aside any of our current understanding of politics, that's a loyal and sympathetic type of story.
Well, I think it's a bit narrow to kind of focus on just that interpretation, but that's broadly correct. Yeah, I'd say. But it is interesting about like Les Mis as a story, and this is kind of referring to more the popular understanding of Les Mis. This is kind of what I mean when I say like there's Les Mis, like the book, and all of this great depth that I think is often missed when people just like listen to just the musical or just the movie, which are good. I'm not denying that. I think those are great, but the more popular understanding has kind of taken on that view of like the righteous view against kind of having a martyr's death against the evil government state, whatever you want to call it. Like for example, in Hong Kong in 2024 or something like that, during like when they were doing rioting there, they would literally sing out in English. Like, do you hear the people sing? Because that's the understanding of Les Mis is like of like a popular understanding that has people across the world have taken on the idea of like we can use this as a story for like as our symbol of fighting against oppressive regimes and things like that. So that's like an interesting side piece on its own, which isn't quite associated with all of this, but it's stories have a way of like being adapted and mutating and changing and different people from different perspectives using them for different reasons.
Yeah. Got a few more minutes here. I would like to finish a little early, but you have anything to wrap up? I know we seem to go shorter and shorter each time, but
well, I like to keep things a little shorter for you, and this one isn't super long. I don't want it to make it just me angry young person ranting about society. I do hopefully through some of my ramblings something of a point has been made, but I do want to kind of just do one more quotation reading, which is about Javert's suicide versus kind of how it's portrayed in the movie / the musical. Just to kind of as like one final contrast, and then there's like one final, then that'd pretty much be it. But so this is reading from right as Javert is going through this really intense inner turmoil. And again, I think this kind of can show the strength of like text is often the case that you can really get inside somebody's head. And in the musical, they do this by having him like singing about like all like these conflicting emotions and what does he do. But I think that the book, if you read it, it's actually much more impactful in how you're able to understand what's going on. So these are they're kind of not all together; they're a bit disjointed, but these are a group of quotations. So I'll just kind of read them through. For several hours, Javert had ceased to be simple. He beheld before him two paths, both equally straight, but he beheld two, and that terrified him. Him who had never had in all his life known more than one straight line. And the poignant anguish lay in this, that the two paths were contrary to each other. One of these straight paths excluded the other. He was forced to acknowledge that goodness did exist. This convict had been good, and he himself, on precedence and he himself, unprecedented circumstance, had just been good also. So he was becoming depraved. He found that he was a coward. He conceived a horror of himself. Javert's ideal was not to be human, to be grand, to be sublime. It was to be irreproachable. Now he had just failed in this. And this is the final paragraph right before that chapter ends, where he dies. Javert remained motionless for several minutes, gazing at this opening of shadow. He considered the invisible with a fixity that resembled attention. The water roared. All at once he took off his hat and placed it on the edge of the quarry. A moment later, a tall black figure, which a belated passerby in the distance might have taken for a phantom, appeared erect upon the parapet of the quay, bent over towards the Seine, then drew itself up again and fell straight down into the shadows. A dull splash followed, and the shadow alone was in the secret of the convulsions of that obscure form which had disappeared beneath the water. So those are, again, they're not all together, but that's what I mean by when you're reading that, it's like, whoa, like you're really able to understand what this person is going through. And that's like every character in this entire book. And again, this isn't bashing on the movie or anything like that, but I'm just trying to draw attention that the kind of the contrast and the difference between the two, and kind of where their strengths are able to be perceived, and how in this case I believe that the you were able to get so much more from actually reading the original text than you are necessarily from just watching Javert sing about, like, you know, like this inner turmoil that he's having. Like, that is powerful, but I think this has a certain power of its own that is just so much different, that you can't quite capture it in any media format, no matter how good you are.
Yeah. Les Mis the video game. That's what I think should come out next. Video game adaptation.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, honestly, but I'm sure it'd just be weird or something. I don't know. I don't even know that'd be an interesting video game. I don't even know how you do that.
It'd probably be like Last of Us style, where it's just you're carried along through the story just to experience the story in a different way. But
yeah, well, and Last of Us actually I think is a good example of how certain stories fit their particular format perfectly. Like I've not played the games and I haven't watched the movies, but from what I can tell from, I think it's Joshua who has, and maybe you have as well, or something like that. Was it you and Josh who talked about the adaptation of Last of Us?
Yeah, a while ago, and we've done a video game adaptation episode. Yeah,
or how like video games have a certain power in and of themselves because you're the active participant, and that's sort of what I'm kind of saying for books as well, is that you are reading this, and it's not like you're playing it or anything, but often the case is it's a journey that you're going through with the book and with these characters, and that has a certain power of what the author is able to do with that text. It's hard. I think it's hard to kind of explain unless you actually go through it yourself. That's what I'm encouraging people to do ultimately. It's like, you know, read some good stuff. Find some like find some old books, you know, that are classics or things like that. Like that, maybe they're long, maybe they're hard to understand. Find an abridged version. But I would just encourage people to, you know, try and find and think and consider some of the great depth that we have in this world that is manifest, like being able to understand God's wonderful creation, either like just in nature or just like in the amazing minds that have produced incredible works. And that's a variety of things. So that's kind of my final encouragement for people is like, you know, try and check out these things, because there's a lot of good stuff, even if you don't have to agree or understand or get all of it.
Yeah, sounds good. 2 things to wrap up, unrelated. I looked it up. Women's sled hockey doesn't really exist in the Olympics or Paralympics because there's not enough representation throughout the world. There was the World Championships in 2025 and they only had 5 teams. So that's kind of why it hasn't come to the Paralympics. So take that, Canada. We beat you 3 for 3 in all the hockeys. But I had to flex that. My camera's back. Next week, I hope we can do a roundtable. At the very least, we will probably be talking about Project Hail Mary, because Zach and I are seeing it on Friday, and that's kind of the same vibe. I'm saying that not just as an announcement, but because you said read some books from good authors, and Zach is supposed to finish Project Hail Mary by assignment from his girlfriend before we go see the movie, but we'll definitely be talking about that next week. So hopefully that's not going to spoil it for many people. Otherwise, or maybe we'll just try and keep it spoiler free. But unless you have anything else.
I think I will just end on one final quote from the book. This is by Jean Valjean when he's just about to die, and I think I'll just want to end with this. It is nothing to die. It is dreadful not to live. There you go. That's what
Absolute cinema. All right. Thank you
all.
guys for joining. Yes, have a good evening, book club. That'd be Will's department, but I'm not opposed. Share this with a friend. Make sure to like and subscribe. All those things. Until next week, know that you're loved. God bless.
See ya.